Today we're going to tell you about estuaries.
An estuary is a partially enclosed coastal body of brackish water with one or more rivers or streams flowing into it and with a free connection to the open sea.
The word estuary is delivered from the Latin word asterium, meaning tidal inlet of the sea, which in itself is delivered from the term aetus, meaning tide.
There have been many definitions proposed to describe an estuary. The most widely accepted definition is a semi-enclosed coastal body of water which has a free connection with the open sea and within which seawater is measurably diluted with fresh water derived from land drainage. However, this definition excludes a number of coastal water bodies such as coastal lagoons and brackish seas. A more comprehensive definition of an estuary is a semi-enclosed body of water connected to the sea as far as the tidal limit or the salt intrusion limit and receiving freshwater runoff. However, the freshwater inflow may not be perennial, the connection to the sea may be closed for part of the year, and tidal influence may be negligible. This broad definition also includes fjords, lagoons, river mouths, and tidal creeks. An estuary is a dynamic ecosystem having a connection to the open sea through which the seawater enters with the rhythm of the tides. The seawater entering the estuary is diluted by the fresh water flowing from rivers and streams.
Round river valleys are also known as coastal plain estuaries. In places where the sea level is rising relative to the land, seawater progressively penetrates into river valleys and the topography of the estuary remains similar to that of a river valley. This is the most common type of estuary in temperate climates. Well-studied estuaries include the Severn Estuary in the United Kingdom and the Ems-Dollar along the Dutch-German border. The width-to-depth ratio of these estuaries is typically large, appearing wedge-shaped in cross-section in the inner part and broadening and deepening seaward. Water depths rarely exceed 100 feet.
Bar-built estuaries are found in places where the deposition of sediment has kept pace with rising sea level, so as the estuaries are shallow and separated from the sea by sand spits or barrier islands. They are relatively common in tropical and subtropical locations. These estuaries are semi-isolated from ocean waters by barrier beaches, barrier islands, and barrier spits. Formation of barrier beaches partially encloses the estuary, with narrow inlets allowing contact with the ocean waters. Bar-built estuaries typically develop on gently sloping plains located along tectonically stable edges of continents and marginal seacoasts. They are extensive along the Atlantic Gulf Coast of the U.S. in areas with active coastal depositions of sediments and where tidal ranges are less than 13 feet.
Fjords were formed where Pleistocene glaciers deepened and widened existing river valleys so that they became U-shaped in cross-sections. At their mouths, they are typically rocks, bars, or sills of glacial deposits, which have the effect of modifying the estuary circulation. Fjord-type estuaries are formed in deeply eroded valleys formed by glaciers. These U-shaped estuaries typically have steep sides, rock bottoms, and underwater sills, contoured by glacial movement. The estuary is shallowest at its mouth, where terminal glacier moraines or rock bars form sills that restrict water flow. In the upper reaches of the estuary, the depth can exceed 1,000 feet. The width-to-depth ratio is generally small. In estuaries with very shallow sills, tidal oscillations only affect the water down to the depth of the sill, and the waters deeper than that may remain stagnant for a very long time. So there's only an occasional exchange of the deep water of the estuary with the ocean. If the still depth is deep, water circulation is less restricted, and there is a slow but steady exchange of water between the estuary and the ocean.
In a salt wedge estuary, river output greatly exceeds marine input, and tidal effects have a minor importance. Fresh water floats on top of the seawater in a layer that gradually thins as it moves seaward. The denser seawater moves landward along the bottom of the estuary, forming a wedge-shaped layer that is thinner as it approaches land. As a velocity difference develops between the two layers, shear forces generate internal waves at the interface, mixing the seawater upward with the fresh water. An example of a salt wedge estuary is the Mississippi River.
The most important variable characteristics of estuary water are the concentration of dissolved oxygen, salinity, and sediment load. There are extreme spatial variability in salinity, which a rare of near zero at the tidal limit of tributary rivers to 3.4% at the estuary mouth. At any one point of the salinity will vary considerably over time and seasons, making it a harsh environment for organisms. Sediment often settles in intertidal mudflats, which are extremely difficult to colonize. No point of attachment exists for algae, so vegetation-based habitat is not established. Sediment can also clog feeding and respiratory structures of species, and special adaptations exist within mudflat species to cope with this problem. Lastly, dissolved oxygen variation can cause problems for life forms.
Estuaries are incredibly dynamic systems where temperature, salinity, turbidity, depth, and flow all change daily in response to the tides. This dynamism makes estuaries highly productive habitats, but also makes it difficult for many species to survive year-round. As a result, estuaries, large and small, experience strong seasonal variations in their fish communities. In winter, the fish community is dominated by hardy marine residents, and in summer, a variety of marine and andromous fishes move in and out of estuaries, capitalizing on their high productivity. Estuaries provide critical habitat to a variety of species that rely on estuaries for life cycle completion. Pacific heron are known to lay their eggs in estuaries in the bays. Surf perch give birth in estuaries. Juvenile flatfish and rockfish migrate to estuaries to rear, and andromous salamides and lampreys use estuaries as migration corridors. Also, migratory bird populations such as the black-tailed godwit rely on estuaries.
Two of the main challenges of estuarine life are the variability in salinity and sedimentation. Many species of fish and invertebrate have various methods to control or conform to the shifts in salt concentrations and are termed osmoconformers and osmoregulators. Many animals also burrow to avoid predation and to live in a more stable sedimental environment. However, large numbers of bacteria are found within the sediment which have a very high oxygen demand. This reduces the levels of oxygen within the settlement, often resulting in partially anoxic conditions, which can be further exacerbated by limited water flux. Phytoplankton are key primary producers in estuaries. They move with the water bodies and can be flushed in and out with the tides. Their productivity is largely dependent upon the turbidity of the water. The main phytoplankton present are diatoms and dinoflagellates, which are abundant in the sediment.
Remember, it's important to remember that a primary source of food for many organisms on estuaries, including bacteria, is detritus from settlement of the sedimentation.
Lake Pontchartrain is a brackish estuary located in southeastern Louisiana in the United States. It covers an area of 630 square miles with an average depth of 12 to 14 feet. Some shipping channels are kept deeper through dredging. It is roughly oval in shape, about 40 miles from the west to east and 24 miles from south to north.
The Chesapeake Bay is an estuary in the United States of Maryland and Virginia. The bay is located in the mid-Atlantic region and is primarily separated from the Atlantic Ocean by the Delmarva Peninsula, with its mouth located between Cape Henry and Cape Charles. With its northern portion in Maryland and the southern part in Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay is a very important feature for the ecology and economy of those two states, as well as others. More than 150 major rivers and streams flow into the bay's 64,299 square mile drainage basin, which covers parts of 6 states: New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, and all of Washington, D.C.
The Shannon Estuary is a large estuary where the river Shannon flows into the Atlantic Ocean. The estuary has a lime-rich city at its head, and its seaward limits are marked by Loop Head to the north and Cary Head to the south. The estuary defines the main boundary between the County Cary, County Limerick to the south, and County Clare to the north.
Rookery Bay National Estuary Research Reserve is an estuary and protects 110,000 acres of coastal lands and waters at the northern end of the 10,000 islands on the Gulf Coast of Florida. Rookery Bay National Estuary Research Reserve represents one of the few remaining undisturbed mangrove estuaries in North America. The Rookery Bay and 10,000 Islands ecosystem is a prime example of a nearly pristine subtropical mangrove forested estuary. Rookery Bay Reserve is located in the West Florida subregion of the West Indian Biographic Region. A 10-mile loop road through Rookery Bay was proposed in 1963. The road would have facilitated vast coastal development around Rookery Bay, but a new perspective emerged in the community. With the help of the Collier County Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy, the Collier Audubon Society, and a number of private investors, a grassroots effort resulted in the purchase of 3,362 acres. This acreage eventually became the Rookery Bay National Estuarine Sanctuary, with officially designation by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in 1980. Shortly thereafter, the name was changed to Rookery Bay National Estuary Research Reserve.
Of the 32 largest cities in the world in the early 1990s, 22 were located on estuaries. As ecosystems, estuaries are under threat from human activities such as pollution and overfishing. They are also threatened by sewage, coastal settlement, land clearance, and much more. Estuaries are affected by events far upstream and concentrate materials such as pollutants and sediments. Land runoff and industrial, agricultural, and domestic waste enter rivers and are discharged into estuaries. Contaminants can be introduced which do not disintegrate rapidly in the marine environment, such as plastics, pesticides, furans, dioxins, phenols, and heavy metals. Such toxins can accumulate in the tissues of many species of aquatic life in a process called bioaccumulation. They also accumulate in benthic environments such as estuaries and bay muds, a geological record of human activities of the last century. The elemental composition of biofilm reflects areas of the estuary impacted by human activities and over time may shift the basic composition of the ecosystem and the reversible or irreversible changes in the abiotic and biotic parts of the systems from the bottom up. For example, Chinese and Russian industrial pollution such as phenols and heavy metals has devastated fish stocks in the Amur River and damaged its estuary soil.
You can do a lot to protect estuaries by not overfishing, not littering, not polluting, not releasing invasive and exotic animals into the wild, which is illegal, not using motor boats when possible to prevent manatees' back from being cut, not releasing toxins, poisons into the water, and etc. Even littering upstream and animal waste can affect estuaries, as the water can flow, moving the litter and animal waste from the river to the estuary. Remember, the estuary is home to many species of the plant and animal. Even if one tiny organism becomes extinct due to harmful and deadly impact into the estuary, it will affect the entire food chain of the estuary.
Thank you for watching this Adventurous Kids episode.